Okay, so I just talked for 10 minutes to myself trying to explain this, and then I realized I wasn't recording, so now I'm just kicking myself in the brain. So just a couple of things that I changed here. So let's start with the textures. I just added these line sync successfully loaded animations, etc. without an error. And then here in the creature, I just changed some of the spacing for the curly braces. And then in the player class, this is where the main changes were. I have the ticking method just so that it ticks all the animations, of course, and then I get the input. However, I also check use. I do the check use method, which says on collision stay dot use. So on collision stay is a function I made that returns the entity that I'm colliding with, and that entity that I'm colliding with I call it its use method. And then this line object requires non-null. That just means that in case that on collision stay is null, then we're just gonna skip this line. We're just gonna ignore this line and not run it. That way we don't get an error. This on collision stay just has two rectangles, the collision bounds and the use rectangle. And then there's an integer, which is the use rectangle size, that we set the width and the height to the use rectangle to. And then we do a bunch of math stuff here. So if we're holding down the key up, the up key, so you can see this is the method I made. Then we're just gonna we're gonna set the use rectangle box, and same thing with down, left, right. Otherwise, if we're not pressing any of these keys, we're just gonna return null. And that's where that object, this require non-null object comes in. And then otherwise, if everything checks out, and then we're going to move on to this for loop, and we're going to loop through each entity in the entity's array list and check if that entity we're iterating through is equal to the player, and if it is, then it's just going to continue. Otherwise, we'd be saying that we're colliding with itself, that the player would be colliding with the player. And otherwise, if it's not itself, then it's going to check if the collision bounds with the 0 as the x offset and the y offset intersects the use rectangle, and if it does, then we're going to return that entity that we're colliding with. And that's it for the player. So then in the flower pot, I just have this quick line here in the use method. So that's what this is right here. I'm calling the use method, right? And if I do collide with anything, it's going to call its method. In this case, if we collide with the flower pot, and it's going to call this method right here, the use method. If I go over here to the entity class, I just did some spacing out just to make it more readable for me. And then in the classroom, finally, I just, added this line, and that's it. So now if I run the program, you can see that when I collide with this flower pot, it'll say used flower pots. If I stand next to it, nothing will happen, but if I collide with it, meaning like I'm running into it, then it'll use it. That's how we're going to use stuff in this game. So, thanks for watching. Hope to see you soon, and see you in the next video. Bye.